Hey everybody, New York, Dan here. Guess what, guys? I'm coming at you with something a little different. It is an eclectic channel. That's right. This just came up. I wanted to help out Ed. Yeah, Ed is on another YouTube channel he runs called Trying Not to Sink. He had a big problem with his boat, more like a yacht, 65-foot Hatteras. And it has twin Detroit diesels. These are massive engines, guys. I was just at the dock filming one over in Northport the other day. If you look at my video that I posted yesterday, yeah, amazing sound these engines have, V8s. And the ones that Ed has, they are 8V92s. They have a turbocharger. And all these engines have a supercharger on them because they are a two-stroke diesel. Yup. Now, he had a big problem. He had coolant leaking out of one of the cylinder liners, apparently, or between the cylinder liner and the engine block. We're going to talk about this. I invite everyone to check my channel out as well and subscribe. A lot of cool stuff. I have a boat myself. I have a 25-footer, 4 winds. Now, on my channel, I've shown, and I'm going to be showing more stuff like this. I'm known to what's called MacGyver stuff. You know that show from the 80s, MacGyver? Yeah, I fix junk. If it's broken, I've done it with my boat. I had coolant in the engine oil of my boat. It's a nasty situation. When you check the oil, the engine's stumbling or it's running a little weird, and you look in there and it looks like Sarasota Tim's coffee. Yeah, milky coffee. That's what it looks like, your engine oil. And you're like, oh no, this is serious. Bad damn news. That's happened to me, and people told me I need to junk my boat engine and get a whole new engine. I proved them wrong. I got it running again. I know how to MacGyver it. I'm always doing stuff like this. So what I wanted to do, I was watching Ed's video today where they said their engine is toast. They had a mechanic come and look at it. What happened is, yeah, there are O-ring seals at the bottom and top of the cylinder liners. I'm going to put in a clip right here. I filmed right off Ed's video where he showed the cylinder liner. We're going to insert it right here. I don't want to make a career out of this, guys. I'm doing a quick video here. Right here, we'll put it in. So right here is a picture Ed put up. He's right there of the Detroit cylinder liner for the 8V92. And you see that section up here? This is where I believe the coolant is. And then there's a seal down here. Over here, you got coolant. I think what the mechanic's talking about, it's leaking right here at the bottom of this seal. And then this is where the air box is. You see those ports? Yeah, those are actually, you know what those are? They might be intake ports. Yeah, that's why it's called the air box. That's under pressure from the turbocharger and the supercharger. There's 4 valves, and I think they're all exhaust valves on these engines. That's how it works. So there's air here, and I guess the coolant is leaking into the air box. That's what's going on. And then this goes into the crankcase down here. It's really messed up. Here's a picture of their Hatteras motor yacht. It's 65 feet. This is when they hoisted it out of the boatyard a couple weeks ago. Yeah, they had it out on with the travel lift there. It is a massive ship. I think they are made with fiberglass, if I'm not mistaken here. So they were trying to go on a trip to Puerto Rico on their yacht, and it was going well. They were off of Florida when they started to have trouble with one of the engines. Just a little clip of their channel. This is what they're doing. See if they... I think they have some more video footage here. There we go. Taking a trip on a boat like this, a yacht, so to speak, this would be insane compared to my boat. I have a 25-footer. But yeah, it's scary to do this stuff. That's a lot of yacht to handle without a crew, 65 feet. It has an enclosed bridge. It's got glass around it. Pretty cool stuff. Here's a clip of them in the engine room from a previous video. You can see how tight everything is. You can get around these engines, but to rebuild them in that engine room, that's tough. Okay, so you see the cylinder liner. Now you know more about what I'm talking about. That plugs into the engine block, and it has that coolant passage around the top. That's where the combustion's taking place, right in there, and the piston's inside going up and down. All right, the problem is at the bottom seal there where there's an O-ring, Ed's mechanic said the O-ring probably got cooked. It probably got overheated. That's what his mechanic said. I disagree. I don't think it did get overheated if Ed's been paying close attention to the temperatures, and he said it usually runs in the 170s. Those are my birds flying around, by the way. I have parakeet birds here. If you see my channel, you'll see them. But the deal is, if it's in the 170s, there's no way that's getting cooked down there. That's down at the bottom. It shouldn't be a factor. I think more likely what happened is there's a special chemical you got to add to the coolant on these engines. They're considered a wet liner. The older Detroit 8V71 had a dry liner. The liner was put in there, and the block had its own cooling passages. It was sealed off from the liner. The liner had a dry fit, and the heat just conducted through the metal. Long story short, the 8V92 is higher performance, and they made it a wet liner, which is an improvement for performance. But you got to be real careful about this, because with these diesels, there's a phenomenon called cavitation that can take place where little air bubbles develop from the vibrations and the shock waves. And these little air bubbles bounce around. This is crazy stuff. But they can actually erode the metal. They can make holes in it. And I got to be damn careful, because my van, I have an International Power Stroke diesel from 1998 in there. And that could have the same problem. There's a special chemical additive that Ford sold, and you have to put it into the cooling system. I believe it's called something like HCA. It's an additive to prevent cavitation from eating up the metal. It treats the coolant. Now, I don't know. Does Ed even know about this? Did he know about this before? Did he check the levels of that chemical in the cooling system? Or maybe the previous owner wasn't up on it, and I suspect it got eaten away by the O-ring liner at the bottom. The metal could have gotten damaged a bit. Or maybe the O-ring's just very old and it dried up. I've seen these O-rings on my boat. I have a fill port on the deck that has a nice rubber O-ring around it as a gasket with a fancy stainless, one of those coin Titan things. I think it's the pump out port for the waste system. So I'm like, okay, that O-ring looks like garbage. It's all dried up and cracked. I bought a brand new one. They're made of neoprene rubber. I put it on. I got it at the hardware store, though, to be fair. I put it on there. Less than a year later, it's all cracked up again. So, and who knows what year that O-ring is from. Long story short, to fix this thing, being that I do MacGyvering and I know how to do this junk, you see, in order to replace this, you got to take the whole liner out of the engine, and the piston has rings around the top for sealing, and on the bottom, I think, on those. They're massive. So it's very hard to get the liner back over the piston. I don't know if there's a trick to doing that without taking the piston out of the engine, because this is where it gets real complicated. You could probably get the cylinder head off while it's in the boat, and you could probably, you might be able to pull the liner out and leave the piston in. This is one MacGyver I would look into, and then see if there's some kind of a hack where you could put the liner back over the piston without having to take the crankshaft apart, the bottom end they call it, apart, because then you got to take the oil pan off and you got to lift that engine up in order to do that. And that's where it gets real tricky, if there's enough room in there to pull this off. He was talking about cutting a hole in the side of the boat to put a new engine. That is, oh man, that's a tough one. If this boat's made, you can leave in the comments, by the way, open discussion. I don't block anything. If this boat's made out of fiberglass, that's really hard. You got to cut it, and then you got to repair the fiberglass to put the panel back in. I think it would be a little easier if it's aluminum, because that can be welded. It's a little easier to do something like that. I don't know how this works, guys, as far as getting a massive hole in the side of the boat, or how you get these engines out. Don't tell me at the factory they put the engines in and then they like put the deck and stuff on the boat and like seal them in. That's a bad way to do it. A bad concept, because you're basically screwing over anyone that needs to re-engine the boat. Very strange stuff. But what I would do, I would try to MacGyver it right in the boat. And like I said, if you can pull the liner out and then put it back over the piston, having the piston still in the engine without having to mess with the connecting rod, you might be able to pull it off. Because once you get the liner out, you could clean that metal up or put a brand new liner in with new O-ring seals. You might be able to pull that off if the block side isn't where the corrosion is. If it's not leaking along the block metal. The block is cast iron, right? So that's like bored. It's machined out. On the block side, the casting is like machined out so it's smooth where that liner plugs in. And the question is, did that get damaged? Now here's an even better MacGyver, or lazier one, and I would definitely try this if I own this boat. If you can isolate which cylinder, you figure out from the airbox. By the way, all those liners go into an airbox, so there is a way to see the outside of that liner where all those ports are, and you can see which one's leaking. If it's only like one liner that's leaking, this is where I would really MacGyver it. You have to get into that coolant passage for that one liner. You got to isolate that passage to have this work right. Birds are chiming in here. Now, depending on which cylinder it is, you got to follow the flow. And this is where you got to get diagrams out, and this becomes a career. You can look it up. I'm not going to put it on here to make the video too technical, too boring. I'm trying to just give the concept idea. You could see how to get coolant into that one cylinder that's leaking. If there's no easy way to get in there, you may, in fact, from the airbox or higher up on the block casting, you may be able to drill a hole into that coolant passage. This is crazy. I'm telling you, this is how I MacGyver it. You drill a hole into that passage near the top of it, or where you can find like the metal's thinner. It's cast iron. Carefully drill a hole. Yeah, you're going to think I'm crazy saying this, right? Well, guess what? If you're real careful, there's a couple things you could do to seal that hole back up. You could tap threads into it, and then you could put a pipe plug into it, like an 1/8 inch pipe plug perhaps, with some Teflon to seal the threads. Or you could possibly even weld it shut. You could weld on cast iron with a nickel welding rod, an arc welder. It might be safer just to tap it if you can just put threads in there. Okay, the reason why I'm saying you got to make a port, if there's no other way to do this, first look at the diagrams. Look if there's some way to get into that one passage. You got to drain all the coolant out of the engine. You got to isolate that one passage. And then what I would do is at the top of that passage, I would stick a tube, clear tubing probably, down that hole I drilled, thread it down there toward the bottom of the cylinder's banked at 60 degrees on that engine. Up by the top of the bank, I would thread a clear tubing in there, and I would inject mixed up. First you mix it, and it gives you like 20 minutes to work with it, 10 minutes maybe. JB Weld epoxy. I would inject it into that passage, and if it's liquidy enough, it will soak into whatever's leaking. There are other epoxies that are even more liquidy. You might want to find even a clear epoxy that flows better. If you mix some up and you test it, how liquidy is it? There are some special marine epoxies too for like putting over wood that are clear. You can like paint on. Even like the stuff, the resin for fiberglass, something that's pretty liquidy. You inject it in there. And the concept is if you can dry the passage out first, if you can completely drain it out, dry it out in there. Yeah, you may even be able to put a little inspection camera through the hole and look inside that coolant passage. But if there's a way you could get the epoxy in there to soak in a bit to the metal and around where that O-ring seal is at the bottom, you let that harden up, and that will, it sets in like 20 minutes or whatever. That will seal the bottom of that cooling passage. That's your MacGyver right there. And then if you don't want to over pressurizing the cooling system either, I would look at the pressure cap on that system. This is another way you can do it to slow down the leakage. Some of them have a ridiculously high pressure cap, like a 20 psi, pounds per square inch. You don't want to over pressurize it. If you're running 170 some odd degrees, you don't need that much pressure in the system. I would put on like a 10-pound pressure cap on there. Yeah, you can get them. They're specialty. Or you can just you can MacGyver the spring in the pressure cap and run it with very low pressure in the cooling system. How do I know? Because New York Dan did this on his boat, because I have a very old engine and I don't want to overpressure my cooling system. I put a very low cap on, 5 psi maybe, something like that. I'm not running it super hot. I put a 160 thermostat. Yup. That way, if the more you pressurize it, if you have a leak, it's going to make it that much worse. The other MacGyver idea I have, you could possibly get away with this one. And this is a real lazy man's cure. I started with the most complex, which is trying to change the liner out in the boat. And I'm working my way down to the lazy ass side. Bums would love these ideas. Give it the old bums rush. This is the real cheap one. You get a head gasket sealer from AutoZone. A bottle. The bottle, as Billy Joel would say. And it has like metallic stuff in it. They have one that's gold. One is silver and the other gold. I've seen both. Bars, Leaks, I think, makes them. And the concept is like the metal flakes will plug up your leak. It's for a bad head gasket or like a leaky cooling system, right? You might have to use 2 of those for the size of the Detroits. You shake them up. You add them to the system. You run the engine. Bums rush. You put that in. And 170s isn't too bad. If you can find a lower temp thermostat, I would like that even better. Maybe a 160 thermostat for those engines. But if you put a low pressure cap on there, yeah, if you're running below 212 degrees, your coolant's not going to be boiling. The only reason they pressurize it is modern day cars, they put a ton of pressure in that system because they run them super hot. Sometimes they're running over 220 Fahrenheit. We're talking here. USA, baby. Fahrenheit degrees. We don't know Celsius over here. We ain't been schooled in that. So, yeah, if you aren't running above boiling points, you don't need as much pressure in that system. It's only to prevent it from boiling if you're running super hot. So see how low you can go on the pressure, maybe 3 psi. Keep it real low, slow and low. You keep the pressure low, and if you put that bars leaks in, you start the engine right up as soon as you add that stuff in. And definitely top it off with the right anti-cavitation additive. Run it right away when you add the bars leaks and see if you can get that damn cylinder to seal up. That liner, the wet liner, see if you can seal that with the bars leaks. Even if there's a way you could like access the engine, the block of the engine before you even run it through the heat exchanger for the cooling water. If you can take out where the thermostat is, drain some of the coolant out in the engine, just so it's over that liner. The liner, you know, pour the bars leak, shake it up, pour it directly into the block of the engine. This is the correct way to MacGyver it. You pour it in, and then you run the engine. I'm trying to think of a way to do it where you're not circulating the coolant through the heat exchanger. There's a way to do it. You could block off that passage and just have it circulating in the block. This is just to make it the most effective way to get the most of that bars leaks into that, around where that liner is. That's the concept. Or if you were able to drill the hole like I was saying and thread it, you could possibly first try drain out the coolant and then fill that whole liner up with the bars leaks directly through that hole, and then put a pipe cap, run the engine, let that bars leak soak in there to plug it, then run it with a lower pressure. You probably, I have a hunch if this was my boat, I could have had this thing fixed in like one day. MacGyver it, and I'd be running it by now. I would be on my way to Puerto Rico. Yup. Hey, you're going to see my boat coming up on the channel. I just got to get working on it. I got way too much on my plate. I'm trying to repair stuff. I have Mercedes diesels too, and the diesel vans. So I kind of know, I know what I'm doing with this kind of stuff, guys. By the way, shout out to DJ David Bunny on Mixcloud. Speaking of yachts, he is playing Yacht Rock. He's going to be doing easy listening or yacht rock music, a mix of it, I hear, this afternoon, right around the time this video is posting. So, yeah, it's over on Mixcloud. DJ David Bunny, like a rabbit. Just search for him. You'll find his live. Don't ask me how I know him. DJ friend of mine, a subscriber. All right, guys. Yeah, hey, I hope this works. If Ed sees it, what have you got to lose? If you're saying the engine's toast anyway, why not give this a try? This could save you like that. This is serious money, man. If you got to cut a hole in the boat, or even the cost of having a mechanic do all that, if you can fix it yourself, go for it. Try these things first. First do the bars leaks. If that doesn't work, you could try to get the epoxy to work. Do these fixes first. hit the thumbs up. Your friend, New York Dan. And yeah, this is a different video than I usually post, but it's an eclectic channel, guys. I hope everyone's having a great afternoon or night, depending when you're seeing this, perhaps morning. Yeah, I'll see you real soon in another video. I just want to get this up here ASAP, see if I could help.